Alright, we're now on turn 52 of Degeneracy. We've claimed the Throne of the Sun. That was that throne conveniently located in our cap circle. We get Horror Struck once again in Ampholia. This time the Horror Mantises routed just a small spectral raiding party, but they do break that province. Here in Mysia, we take over a province from Atlantis with enough ghosts that we basically lose only one of our converted Acertuts and get a couple of Soulless Warriors from our Shade Beasts. In Hobergdorf, we manage to raid a province from Agartha. In Lake Vastness, we poke a province with our Shadow Tribune, but we're just extracting him, so he's just retreating. Here in Momef, we bounce into Agartha once again. This time we're doing just Wind of Death spam. Well, 2 casts, and while we lose the Shadow Soldiers that went with, we do manage to kill probably more than those Shadow Soldiers are worth, although it's worth noting that these Long Deads are actually just animated from the Tomb Oracles, which are technically undead and priests, and are therefore also capable of animating Long Dead. Here in Icton, we just get rid of the rest of Joman's stuff. He has just a bunch of summon chaff here, and then we lose a couple of our Winter Wolves in the process. It's just a bunch of ghosts rolling over random AI chaff, so not much exciting there. Here in Ardun, we capture a province from Mictlan, killing a large number of Sacreds in the process. But this is once again just on account of the fact that Mictlan has essentially no mage support, and we outnumber him tremendously. So between us having a huge number of these Spectral Javelins, and the fact that the Rain Warriors are just not very good, especially for their gold cost, while they have okay combat stats, and in fact, like marginally above average magic resistance, with just a Blood 9 F4 Bless, they're not going to trade particularly well with ghosts, especially when they're outnumbered 2 to 1. Here in Abyssia, Atlantis is essentially just recapturing the capital province, but he probably won't be able to storm with this army as well, so this is just him re-establishing the siege, and if he's clever, he's going to bring in a couple more mages, or just some ethereal troops, because we saw that he had some green lions, and then go ahead and storm that way. Abyssia has taken, or Atlantis, I mean, has taken the offense against me as well, and is raiding a bunch of provinces with his oversized raiding parties. And while I have been ragging on him for these raiding parties being too large, they are at least effective in capturing these provinces, but it is worth noting that he should be able to capture a lot more. In Toledo, we get a handful of air gems. In Mercs, we get a Lore Master and some gold, which is great. In Faircliff, we get a false prophet event, so we have to go ahead and patrol him out. We have started to destroy Joman's last non-capital fort, and we have finished breaking Mictlan's fort. So here in the Mercs, we get this excellent lore master who comes with a bunch of blood slaves. We're just going to be using him as a research guy, so he is scripted to retreat. And he might even do some site searching on the way, thanks to the fact that he has those Earth, Fire, and Blood Paths, and we don't have any of those natively. So he'll be able to do some site searching for us, and then become an extremely valuable researcher, thanks to the fact that these guys just have a tremendous amount of RP from their 15 Adept Research bonus. And while he does cost a fair amount of upkeep, it's definitely worth paying for that amount of research. Having bounced off of this army right over here, we're just going to be doing the move patrol thing with those air random Grand Lemurs once again, and then we're just going to keep hitting these guys, and hopefully we'll eventually be able to decay a few mages, and it's costing us nothing to keep poking it like this. So essentially, high potential rewards for essentially no risk. We're going to be continuing to try to basically just bounce off of Marignon and scare him away without needing to engage his army directly. He captured this province off of Mictlan. Given that Mictlan has since gone AI, it's not really any foul, I guess, on his part to be taking some of Mictlan's provinces, since Mictlan is essentially no longer a contributing factor in the war against, well, me. These guys are going to be trying to storm this castle, but while they're doing that, we're also going to try to send this little raiding party of just ghosts, given that we have plenty of guys right over here, so we have definitely enough ghosts to storm and a fair bit of mage support as well. I am a little bit worried about these guys over here hitting this fort, since it's producing these extremely valuable mages for us. But I'm not scared enough to already back off of this fortress, especially given that this fort actually has a fair amount of defense since it's a castle, and he doesn't have a huge number of guys. It's definitely possible for him to have some gate cleavers and then bring those over, but given that he hasn't shown that he's doing that yet, and in fact hasn't even shown any major earth magic outside of his pretender, I'm not particularly worried. If he was like, if he'd already shown that he was like, making boots and using earth magic on his Angakuk or on his Forgiving Fathers, which can get an earth random, basically doing, the sort of useful, good magic stuff, then I'd be a little bit more worried about gate cleavers and that sort of thing, and basically other hidden siege bonuses that he could bring to bear. But until he actually does that, I'm not going to credit him with that. So I'm like actually comfortable continuing to fortify this fort capturing party right over here, and leaving just a modicum of chaff in here. If I do need to break out, I also can do that. I'll just have basically all of my mages set to retreat, and then just leave like a cluster of ghosts scattered across the front, since we have enough of them that I can make like, I guess kind of like a screen. So I'm not super worried about losing the mages, even if they do manage to instantly burst down that fort. The problem with them instantly bursting the fort is basically just that I would have a seriously hard time recapturing it, since Atlantis' dudes are just so difficult for me to fight as Lemuria. But because Miklin is essentially giving me all these forts right over here, thanks to his collapse, I'm essentially making up for the ground that I've lost to Marignon over here. And similarly, I'm getting more stuff off of Joman over here, so the fact that I'm being pushed back by Atlantis and have not been able to raid him particularly as effectively recently, thanks to the fact that he's been actually putting armies on our border, I'm still not super behind in provinces. Just take a look at our gem income. Most of my gem income is quite low, but I do have a huge amount of death gems, thanks to the fact that I have all of those deadlands from my very large empire, most of which has already had my dominion spread across it. Unsurprisingly, Astral's number 2, since astral sites are found by, of course, the Astral Path and also Holy Magic, which I've just incidentally been searching my provinces with. My fire, earth, and nature income is largely just based on provinces which I've captured, with my air being, I think, just that one random site I found. And yeah, Forest of Troubles there is nice. Mooncatch Lake is nice. Yeah, so the Joman territory isn't getting me a huge number of gems, but the Miklin territory is actually quite good, especially this area right over here, which I've site searched, which kind of makes sense given the fact that I have my nearly rainbow pretender finding me a lot of different gem sites. So that's the current situation. We're still essentially weaker than Atlantis, but managing to fight them off with raiding, and because Joman and Miklin are essentially dead, we're compensating for the fact that Marignon has been able to push me back effectively. This is turn 53, and this turn doesn't go particularly well. In Ardun, we actually managed to lose a lot to this lesser horror cast. He got fairly lucky just by getting a large number of horrors, since it is a random number that generates, and having 6 of them is very difficult for my ghosts to deal with, thanks to the fact that with their magic power, they're quite strong, as I mentioned earlier, similar to other horrors, and they already have very high magic resistance. So they're able to survive the ghosts fairly well, and get rid of this whole army, just on account of the fact that my ghosts can't really hurt them very well. We have an assassination attempt from Joman, which is just a regular ninja. It's the AI, so they're going to use their assassins as assassins, even when they don't have a chance of success. In Oak Halls, we managed to catch and kill a Tunglix, that's always nice, but these are very minor mages, so it's not a huge deal as well. In Berman Heights, that army which we saw of those turtle warriors from Agartha actually pushed into the province and managed to catch it in spite of the fact that we had all of these apparitions. Our Cursed Consul manages to convert one of the blind fighters with his apostasy, and we managed to kill one of the blind lords as well, but thanks to the fact that he has a large number of mage support and just a large number of these very tanky blind fighters, and I have just very little that's actually killy aside from the fear aura of the apparitions, he is able to capture the province. Here in Miskia, this is just a very large group from Atlantis capturing the province. Here in Alluvia, we are beaten by the defending forces of Atlantis, but this is just those Shadow Tribunes which we've been trying to extract. Here in Ampholia, we just capture province with a Grand Lemur leading a huge number of ghostly reinforcements. And here in Warshin, we catch Miklin trying to attack one of our provinces. And at first glance, this fight looks relatively close, given that, they've got a reasonable number of guys and all these guys are sacreds. But as the AI is wont to do, it did not bring enough priests to bless these guys, so these are essentially just all just overpriced regular troops, and these shamblers are certainly overpriced as well. A number of these troops are also starving as well, which gives them a very large morale penalty. So even though their base morale is actually quite high, thanks to the fact that these are, sacred guys, it's actually terrible, including the starvation penalty. Additionally, this Ice Drake is going to be using his Drake Frost Breath, which my ghosts are going to be completely immune to. So between that and the fact that I have a fair number of mages here, I definitely have an advantage in this fight, in spite of the fact that he brought a significant amount of gold to the field. So we put up Darkness and Mass Protection. So Darkness is going to reduce the combat stats of these guys, many of whom are actually diseased from starvation, but even the ones that aren't have a very poor attack and defense now, which is going to give my ghosts a very large advantage. While the Shamblers do have some dark vision, their attack and defense scores were already not particularly high, so it's going to be just awful now. Additionally, while Mass Protection does give fire vulnerability, it gives 10 protection, which, given that our ghosts have a base protection of 0, is a huge advantage. And anti-magic, while not particularly threatening, given that he's not bringing any banishment, is going to help my guys, or would help my guys avoid Blood Vengeance if these guys were actually blessed. So that's why I cast that spell as well. So with the darkness penalty, you can see that my guys were just way killier than these sacreds, and given the fact that they had their starvation morale penalty, they also routed very quickly. And it doesn't take much more to cause an HP rout, and with that battle was a total victory. So this is basically just, an AI blob being killed by high-level magic, but I thought it was worth pointing out which spells I was using here, since those high alteration spells make a huge difference in the power of ghosts when you're actually trying to fight stuff with them. Assuming that you're not going into fire magic, those spells can be incredibly strong at making your guys resist regular troops and crossbows and so on, so I would actually feel comfortable taking an army buffed like that into one of Miklin's Doom stacks, for instance, if I'd managed to burn off his gems first to prevent him from putting up flaming arrows and fire elementals, because once those buffs are up, my guys are easily the equal of the ghosts. And while the demons are going to be still very strong in the anti-magic, or in the darkness, rather, especially the Fiends of Darkness, which are buffed further by it, he doesn't have a huge number of demons, so if I have enough ghosts with the protection buffs, they should be able to trade okay, while the humans are going to be incredibly ineffective with the darkness up. Rigor Mortis and other battlefield-wide spells like that would also definitely make a huge difference, so I was just, so between all of that, we can actually potentially start looking to take some fights. In Sodden Murk, we just raid back a province, lose a few dispossessed spirits. In Silent Wetlands, we get beaten by just enough province defense that my shadow soldiers and crossbowmen aren't able to take it. In Old Land, just a huge number of these ice warriors. In Rendale, we're just raiding back a province and our shade beasts kill a bunch of province defense. In the Great Dune, the same happens, except in this case, it was just some Grand Lemurs prepared to cast their Wind of Death spells, but no army there for them to hit. And in Apriskia, we capture this marginally defended fortress. So, as far as events go, we get additional luck, we get a huge number of fire gems, which would be really cool if we were good at using them, and we've breached the Mercs. Additionally, we've hired this guy right over here, which is an excellent mercenary, thanks to the fact that it's just a huge mage. While most of these guys are being set to storm the castle, we're sending back this guy with the Crown of Command back to the fortress so that he can start gathering up those guys. Given that this raiding party was successful, we're going to be bouncing them back over this way, given that we expect him to recapture this province, but it's also definitely possible that he's going to rout some guys up here, and that they'll be caught and killed, but that's okay because they can still have areas to retreat to, thanks to the fact that we were able to secure this province, and he doesn't have anything that connects to it. In this province, we've been steadily recruiting crossbowmen and even pumped up the province defense to a huge amount to try to take advantage of the fact that it has crossbow PD, based on the fact that we saw this army here. So I was hoping to actually catch that army and kill it, but it looks like Atlantis didn't think it was worth the effort. We're going to be hitting this province over here to basically hit the thing that was captured or that was knocked out by the horrors from Marignan, while this guy is going to be continuing to push over this way. He's just set to cast Darkness, and well, like I'd mentioned, that's not going to be hugely effective against devils, and is even going to be a penalty against Fiends of Darkness. Against a largely human-based army, it's going to definitely increase the effectiveness of my ghosts. So because this army and this army here aren't showing a huge number of those demons, we can expect them to be over here capturing this throne or maybe this capital off of Mictlan instead, which means that my ghosts are going to be fighting essentially just province defense and human troops and so on, which the Darkness is going to be invaluable against. We're going to be sending our Wind of Death spammers once again into the breach. Again, just hoping to take out some mages and tomb oracles, and we're just going to keep doing this until he decides it's not worth the effort to try to protect it. These guys right over here, while they were able to take this province, thanks to the fact that it had no real troops in it aside from those apparitions, they're potentially going to be able to push further in over here, but this province here still has a huge amount of province defense, which is going to go away eventually anyways, thanks to the fact that the population is dying out. So that gold is going to be lost, but it might still be useful for another turn or two if Agartha makes the mistake of trying to attack into it and gets shot up by those crossbows. So we can't, rely on that happening, but we can hope. We can see that Mother Oak's been up for a little bit for Atlantis, thanks to the fact that he has an N9 Pretender, but he hasn't seemed to field anything that uses a huge number of nature gems yet, so he probably has a big bank, so he might put up Gift of Health or another Nature Global, but until he does, we don't really know what all he's going to be fielding. If I were in his position, I'd probably start summoning up Lamias, because I really like Lamias, and they've got a magic attack, which is great against Ethereal Undead. But he might also, just like I mentioned, be saving up for a Nature Global, or just be pumping out a huge number of nature items like Vine Shields and Reinvigoration Gear. And then as far as the former land of Abyssia, we have one of our little raiding parties here across the border into this little subcontinent over here, but most of the territory here has been conquered by Agartha. Ulm has basically just been allowed to have this little, I guess, reservation. This is mostly on account of the fact that he was able to cause a huge amount of economic damage to Abyssia with his Bane Venoms and spies increasing unrest and all sorts of other nastiness. So Agartha has basically made a peace deal with Ulm to let him stay alive in order to not have to deal with that. And in the meantime, Ulm is not really up to much, so I've decided to exchange some poetry with them while we're both just being undead monarchs. And that's the turn.